Hi there. My name is Kelsey Olson, and this is my video reflection number 1 for Aboriginal education and the context for professional engagement. So looking back at my experience in the public school system, I feel that I received some education regarding Indigenous people. However, I believe that students should receive more of an education regarding Indigenous people with more emphasis on reconciliation. I don't remember covering reconciliation in the public school system. Maybe it was covered and I don't remember, but I believe that the way teachers educate their students surrounding Indigenous people and reconciliation can often be overlooked, as it's such a difficult task. I think that if it's done correctly, students can be impacted through reconciliation practices for years to come, which will in turn help our society to recognize the importance of reconciliation for the immense wrongdoings that Indigenous people have faced for so many years. Throughout my life, I'd say that the most impactful learning I've done surrounding Indigenous reconciliation has happened later in life. The first key learning I'd like to talk about involves an experience from a couple of years ago. Growing up, my mom always told me and my siblings that we're Métis. However, it took my family many years to be able to acquire our official Métis status cards. I imagine that this must have been frustrating for my mom, as she always knew she was Métis. However, the government made it difficult for her to legally declare her Métis status. Once my older brothers started entering college and university, my mom wanted to start working harder to gain our official Métis status in order to try to ease some of the financial pressures that university would inevitably put on us. My family decided that the best step would be to hire a genealogist, as it was getting a little too difficult for us to figure out our lineage on our own. Fast forward a couple years, and we're finally able to receive our Métis status cards, as well as various documents recovered by our genealogist, such as letters and old photographs. My parents actually put together a duotang containing all of this information that I still like to look back on, so that was kind of cool as well. Learning about my family history sparked an interest in me, which resulted in me trying to connect more with my Métis history. I started looking into ways I could become more involved in the Indigenous community. Through my research, I discovered the Indigenous Student Circle here at Red Deer College. I decided a good start at learning more would be to start attending some of the events held by the Indigenous Student Circle. The first event I attended was a soup and bannock lunch put on by the group. It was super nice to go and learn more about Indigenous culture, and I was also able to connect with other Indigenous students as well as the Indigenous Student Coordinator. The Indigenous Student Coordinator at Red Deer College helps Indigenous students to be successful in college. After the soup and bannock event, I decided I would like to become more involved in this college group. I went and visited the Indigenous Students Office to inquire about how I can become more involved in the group. I learned that they were really struggling with attendance, and the executive board had essentially diminished as Indigenous students who originally held positions had since graduated. I was asked if I'd like to be on the executive board for the Indigenous Circle, and I was actually appointed the vice president that day. This experience was pretty overwhelming for me because I was now the vice president of an Indigenous group, and I felt like I hardly knew anything about my own culture. I almost felt like I was an imposter. Unfortunately, my time feels like it was cut short because of COVID. Myself and the other members of the group tried for a few months to gain more student involvement and held a few more soup and bannock lunches. Due to COVID, the group has stopped meeting, and I've been unable to participate and learn more about Indigenous culture, at least through this group. Even though my time was cut short with the Indigenous Student Circle, I still really value the people I was able to meet and the things I was able to learn during my short time with this group. That's why I consider this experience a key learning I have done surrounding Indigenous learning. The other experience I wanted to reflect on in this video was another event relating to my Métis status. As I mentioned earlier, my mom really pushed to gain our official Métis documentation in order to allow us to apply for more scholarships and hopefully help to ease some of me and my siblings' expenses. This did prove to be helpful, and me and my brothers were able to receive some scholarships specifically for Métis students. Personally, I have been lucky enough to receive the Indigenous Careers Award for several semesters from Red Deer College. However, since entering the middle years program, my registration has changed to the University of Alberta and not Red Deer College, meaning I must apply for this scholarship through the U of A. This originally didn't matter to me because I thought that since I qualified for this scholarship at Red Deer College, it must work the same through the U of A. But I was wrong. After filling out the application and sending over my Métis card, I heard back from the U of A a few weeks later. They responded saying that I don't qualify for the scholarship because they don't consider my Métis to be Indigenous. This was extremely confusing to me as I had received the award for 2 years prior from Red Deer College, and my brother who went to the University of Calgary also received this award for his whole time there. So how could they say that I'm not Indigenous when I have the documentation to prove it? This is something that I still don't fully understand, but I'm hoping to learn more surrounding this topic in this class. We've actually already briefly talked about it in class, which I found very interesting because it's directly impacted me. This experience has also made me wonder how many other First Nations people experience this exact same thing. I'm looking forward to learning more about these things in this class, but most importantly, I'm excited to better understand how to begin incorporating reconciliation into my own teaching. The other thing I wanted to touch on in this video was just how impactful I found the Orange Shirt Day presentation to be. The residential school system is something that has always been astonishing to me. Learning about the injustices that so many children faced is extremely difficult. When the presenters did the activity where they had us close our eyes and imagine one of our loved ones being taken to a residential school, I was nauseous. Envisioning my 3-year-old niece going through what so many First Nations children went through made me feel sick to my stomach and so angry. It made me feel angry that our government leaders, the people who are supposed to protect Canadians, were the people who created residential schools. It's something that I don't think I'll ever understand, but I was so deeply impacted by the activity that I wanted to make sure that I mentioned it in this reflection. As far as my next steps in learning beyond the course, I plan to continue with the Indigenous Student Circle once COVID is over. I also plan to attend more conferences surrounding Indigenous reconciliation so I can better understand. I think this course will provide me with a good foundation, but I recognize that there is still so much more learning I need to do surrounding this topic. I've already learned so much in the first 3 classes already, so I'm just looking forward to being able to further my knowledge and learn more in this class. Thanks.